In a twist of fate, Kelvin's life was mistakenly taken, but through God's intervention, he was granted his second chance in an entirely new world. As he awakens, Kelvin finds himself in a state of wonder, unsure of his whereabouts and how he ended up in this unfamiliar place when all of a sudden a floating menu appears, revealing his reincarnation and memory loss. Despite this, Kelvin retains his past life skills which he picked before the transfer and discovers that he's a summoner in the new world, filling him with both excitement and uncertainty for the adventures ahead. The menu introduces itself as Melfina, the goddess of reincarnation, and discloses that Kelvin's past self had desired Melfina to be his first follower in this new life. Kelvin's unfortunate death actually resulted from an accident caused by the error of another god, and while seeking the resolution, the god turned to Melfina for assistance, and during this process, Kelvin developed strong feelings for the goddess of reincarnation. Melfina eventually lets Kelvin know that he had willingly sacrificed his memories in exchange for gaining more skill points. Kelvin, having learned about the pact he made, inquires to Melfina if he now has the ability to summon her. However, Melfina clarifies to Kelvin that summoning her would require a significant amount of MP to materialize. Soon after, Kelvin enters a guild to join as an adventurer, but decides against registering as a summoner due to the potential danger it poses, and instead, he opts to become a green mage. After receiving his guild card, Kelvin is assigned rank F as his starting point. Despite this, Kelvin is allowed to take on quests that are one rank above his current level. However, there's a risk involved if he fails such a quest. He will have to face a penalty, and after 10 successful quests, Kelvin's rank will rise. In order to practice summoning magic, Kelvin chooses to undertake the Blue Slime quest. Moreover, Kelvin, while being equipped with a wooden stick, decides to spend the rest of his money to rent a place for the night. As Kelvin continues his journey, he encounters the blue slimes, and to gain an advantage, Kelvin employs his Analyze Eye, a skill that allows him to read and assess the data of his enemies. However, Kelvin also realizes that Melfina is 100 levels above him. Kelvin then decides to proceed with summoning a pact with the blue slime, but only after acquiring its consent. To forge a pact with the blue slime, Kelvin chooses to use physical force and decides to smash the slime instead of using magic, as the latter would instantly kill it. After some effort, Kelvin manages to neutralize the blue slime, and with using half of his MP, Kelvin successfully establishes a pact with the blue slime and decides to name it Clotho. Through their linked hearts, Kelvin finds that he can communicate with Clotho. Without the need for spoken words, Kelvin names it the Followers Network. With his remaining 10 MP, Kelvin summons Clotho to eliminate the other slimes to fulfill his quest. After approaching the slimes, Kelvin communicates his plan to Clotho and instructs it to take on one of the slimes while he himself prepares to attack the other with magic. While having enough resources to defeat a slime, Kelvin successfully cuts off one of the slimes into two, while Clotho defeats the other one with much ease. Assisted by Melfina, Kelvin comes to the realization that Clotho possesses overwhelming power even at just the first level, while unexpectedly, Clotho easily locates and takes out a third slime, leading to the successful completion of Kelvin's quest. After receiving his reward, Kelvin wanders through the city in search of a place to spend the night. Along the way, he encounters a slave trader, but Kelvin chooses to ignore the situation and continues on his way. Shortly after, Kelvin stumbles upon the fairy's Song Inn and decides to stay there for the night, and this is where he encounters Claire, the inn's landlady. While being excited to experience his first meal in the new world, Kelvin is treated to a delicious meal prepared by Claire, and so, Kelvin's new life in another world begins with Melfina, whose voice he can only hear, and Clotho as his companion. After the completion of various quests, Kelvin eventually gets promoted to rank E. Nevertheless, Angie, the quest giver, becomes suspicious of Kelvin and directly inquires whether he was a court mage before. However, Kelvin refrains from discussing any information about his past occupation with Angie. Shortly after, Kelvin requests some rank D quests from Angie when suddenly Cashel interjects into the conversation and encourages Kelvin to consider facing the Black Spirit Knight as his next quest. Furthermore, Angie inquires to Cashel about his recent quest, and Cashel responds by saying that he completed it with ease. However, clearing the lizardmen nest proved to be quite troublesome. After talking to Angie, Cashel shifts his attention to Kelvin and introduces himself, while proudly stating that he is a rank D adventurer. Additionally, Cashel informs Kelvin that his party is preparing to take on the Black Knight Spirit and extends an invitation for Kelvin to join them in their venture. While the Black Spirit Knight is rumored to be exceptionally powerful, Cashel assures that everything will be fine as long as they work together. However, Kelvin, with utmost respect, declines Kelvin's invitation. Furthermore, Kelvin employs his Analyze Eye and discovers that Cashel's title is, in fact, Murderer. Realizing that Cashel may not allow him to leave easily, Kelvin comes up with a solution, and he suggests a challenge wherein the first one to defeat the Black Spirit Knight will be declared the winner. Additionally, Kelvin is aware of Cashel's plan to set a trap either before or after his confrontation with the Black Spirit Knight, and as a precautionary measure, Kelvin decides to reciprocate by setting up a trap of his own for Cashel. After several days have elapsed, Cashel, accompanied by his two party members, arrives at the location to confront the Black Spirit Knight, but to their astonishment, they discover all the undead monsters lying dead on the ground. As they wonder what could have happened, Kelvin emerges from the shadows and warmly greets them. Furthermore, Kelvin provokes Raji, luring him into a confrontation, and immediately Kelvin casts the Mudbind spell, bringing Raji to a sudden halt and preventing him from moving forward. As Jimul makes an attempt to flee, Kelvin responds immediately by summoning Clotho, who got evolved into slimed Latonia a few days ago, to prevent Jimul from getting away. On the other hand, Raji chooses to face Clotho, leaving Cashel to take on Kelvin. However, as the fight progresses, Cashel and his two party members find themselves overpowered and effortlessly defeated by Kelvin and Clotho. Furthermore, Kelvin has a change of heart and decides to forge a pact with the Black Spirit Knight, Gerard, instead of going through with his initial plan to defeat him. Shortly after, Kelvin comes to the realization that the Black Spirit Knight, Gerard, is not some ferocious monster, but rather a knight with a friendly nature. Moreover, Kelvin expresses his desire to form a pact with Gerard. However, Gerard expresses his desire to see Kelvin prove himself worthy of being followed before considering the pact, and to test Kelvin's abilities, they both agree to face off in a confrontation. During the intense battle, Kelvin manages to gain the upper hand by utilizing his air pressure magic. However, the tides of the fight shift when Gerard experiences a sudden recollection of his homeland, Alkal, which was brutally destroyed by the Resin Empire within a matter of days. This emotional flashback affects Gerard greatly, resulting in an alteration, and Gerard successfully breaks through Kelvin's air pressure magic. However, Kelvin, with the aid of Clotho, instantly overpowers Gerard and brings him down. The very next day, Kelvin takes a piece of armor of the Black Spirit Knight to the guild as a proof of his quest completion, and Angie, upon inspecting the piece of armor, declares the successful completion of Kelvin's quest, while everyone cheers for Kelvin. On the other hand, Cashel, along with his two party members, finds themselves confined within a jail cell. Shortly after, Angie mentions to Kelvin that he has earned a special promotion as well as an extra reward from the guild master himself. Meanwhile, Melfina informs Kelvin that someone is waiting for him. The guild master of Parth Adventurers Guild, Leo, warmly welcomes Kelvin and inquires if he hails from another world. Gradually, Kelvin becomes aware that Leo's appraising eye possesses the ability to effortlessly unveil his true identity. In the midst of their discussion, Kelvin's nervousness becomes apparent, but with Gerard's inspiring words to be courageous, Kelvin finds his confidence and proceeds to question Leo confidently. He inquires why Leo refrained from taking any action against Cashel, even though Leo was aware that Cashel was a murderer. However, Leo provides Kelvin with a clear explanation that Cashel is a noble from the militant nation of Trison. Leo further explains that he was actively gathering evidence against Cashel and preparing to take the necessary actions, but to Leo's advantage, Kelvin handled the situation by taking care of Cashel before Leo had the opportunity to step in. Furthermore, Leo mentions to Kelvin that he wants to be his friend and not a foe. Moreover, Leo conveys to Kelvin that the revival of the Demon King is imminent, and he desires Kelvin to stand by his side during the impending chaos. Additionally, Leo informs Kelvin that he will utilize his authority to raise Kelvin's rank while granting him more freedom in choosing missions to undertake. Shortly after, Kelvin agrees to Leo's conditions and willingly decides to assist him. As Kelvin returns to the inn, Claire expresses her appreciation to Kelvin for being promoted to rank B so quickly. After some time, Kelvin asks Melfina to tell him about the heroes she reincarnated, and so Melfina informs Kelvin that some time ago, the priestess of the Holy Empire of Deramis conducted a summoning ritual, and as a result, Melfina selected some intelligent and attractive individuals to be reincarnated. Additionally, Melfina speculates that these individuals have likely reached a considerably high level of power by now. Soon after that, Kelvin ventures out to acquire a slave whom he intends to train and eventually include in his party. Furthermore, Kelvin had already taken an interest in a particular slave from the day he arrived in this world. However, he unexpectedly encounters this very slave, but unfortunately, the slave is afflicted with the curse of the Fire Dragon King, causing anyone who touches her to be instantly burned. Nevertheless, Kelvin comes to the realization that the slave he had his eye on has not utilized any points, fulfilling his desired condition. Furthermore, he discovers that the curse afflicting her can be lifted with the help of this sacred blessed spell, which requires the assistance of a white magic user. After a period of time, Kelvin returns to the slave trader and offers a bag full of gold coins as payment in exchange for acquiring the slave Ephil. While on their way back, Eiffel stops and shows her heartfelt gratitude towards Kelvin for purchasing her, while Kelvin, with a sincere tone, proposes to Eiffel that he would like her to join his party. He then approaches her, and with the assistance of the sacred blessed spell, begins the process of breaking the curse that had burdened her for so long. Upon successfully removing Eiffel's Fire Dragon King's curse, Eiffel suddenly overcomes with emotions and breaks into tears. However, Kelvin quickly moves to console and comfort her during this touching moment. Shortly after, Kelvin returns to the inn and introduces Eiffel to Claire, and while being unimpressed with Eiffel's presence, Claire takes the initiative to freshen her up before the dinner. As Kelvin patiently waits, Claire returns with Eiffel, who looks very stunning after the cleaning. Shortly after, Claire takes charge of preparing dinner for Kelvin and Eiffel, and her efforts result in a delicious and satisfying meal. As time goes on, Kelvin reveals to Eiffel that he is a summoner and proceeds to introduce her to Melfina and Clotho. Additionally, Kelvin intentionally requests that Eiffel keep their summoner abilities a secret, and moreover, he advises Eiffel to acquire the same skill that he possesses, which is the double growth rate skill and double skill points, and as for the remaining points Eiffel has, Kelvin grants her the freedom to decide how she wants to utilize them. Additionally, Kelvin, along with Melfina, comes to the decision that it would be beneficial for Eiffel to start selecting skills and begin her learning process. Following the defeat of the evil sage tree, Kelvin gathers his well-earned rewards, and with a remarkable streak of 9 consecutive successes, he is now only one accomplishment away from qualifying for the promotion exam to rank A. In the meantime, Angie and Eiffel plans to spend some time together at a cafe, and they extends an invitation to Kelvin to join them, to which Kelvin agrees. As Kelvin realizes that it's essentially a date, he begins to feel guilty, thinking that Melfina would never have allowed him to go if she were present. During this period, Melfina temporarily departed from Kelvin's follower network, supposedly to deliver a prophecy. Meanwhile, as Kelvin, Eiffel, and Angie are having lunch together, rumors begin to circulate among the people, speculating that Kelvin is involved in a romantic affair with both the girls simultaneously, when suddenly Tabura, the third prince of Trison, confronts Kelvin and aggressively kicks the table in front of him. In response, Kelvin reacts with a degree of misbehavior towards Tabura. Additionally, Tabura makes a demand for Kelvin to release Eiffel and Angie, offering him mercy in return, but Kelvin confidently steps forward and swiftly neutralizes both of Tabura's guards with ease. In response to the threat, Tabura admits that he came to Parth to recruit an adventurer he has heard so much about, referring to Kelvin. After being wary of the fact that Kelvin is that adventurer, Tabura asks Kelvin to come work with him, but Kelvin declines. At the Grand Cathedral in the Holy Empire of Deramis, Colette provides a report to Melfina about the heroes whom she had reincarnated, and it appears that the heroes are making steady progress and growing in strength. Furthermore, Melfina delivers a prophecy indicating the presence of an evil force in a major country of the Western continent. However, she instructs Colette to send the heroes to that location, while explicitly warning them to avoid Parth at all costs. Over at the inn, Eiffel seems to be struggling with her emotions and unable to contain her feelings any longer. She wakes Kelvin up and questions if she is not as beautiful as other women, all the while confessing her love for him, to which Kelvin responds to Eiffel that she is, indeed, the most beautiful girl he has ever seen. However, he advises her to express such feelings to the person that she genuinely loves. The following day, Melfina arrives, and everyone is concerned about whether the heroes of Deramis will be prepared in time. Meanwhile, Claire pays a visit to Kelvin's door to inform him about the news that the guild master is looking for him. When Kelvin meets with Rio, the guild master, Rio informs him about a recent demon sighting in a rank D dungeon known as Hermit's Cave. During their exploration of Hermit's Cave, a group of adventurers stumbles upon a hidden room where they encounter the sight of a demon. Luckily, the demon appears to be sealed, preventing any immediate danger. However, Rio is now concerned about the true potential and power of this demon, leading him to question whether he should assign Kelvin for a rank as quest to deal with the situation. Additionally, Ryan informs Kelvin that there was an alleged attack on Tabura, the third prince, which nearly caused a diplomatic crisis with Trison, and despite the potential risks, Kelvin bravely accepts the quest. Subsequently, as Kelvin and his followers enter the secret room, they are greeted by the archdemon Victor, and in the midst of their encounter, Victor reveals that he has also abducted Sarah, the daughter of the demon Lord Gustav. Suddenly, Victor seals off the room, leaving them trapped. Victor then further discloses that his unique skill in temperate feeding enables him to absorb all of their powers. Moreover, Victor reveals that he has been caring for Sarah as if she were his own daughter, and he firmly believes that by devouring her, he will acquire an immense amount of power. As Victor prepares for the battle, Kelvin gives off a smirk which apparently offends Victor greatly. Furthermore, Gerard explains to Eiffel that during his battle with Kelvin, he noticed the same smirk on Kelvin's face, and this leads them to conclude that Kelvin is a battle junkie, as he becomes increasingly excited when faced with more powerful enemies. Victor summons his demon companions and orders them to attack Kelvin and his followers. However, in a remarkably short period of time, Kelvin and his team effortlessly defeat all of the demons. In response to Kelvin's smirk, Victor warns Kelvin to wipe off that smirk from his face, and as a response to Victor's demand, Kelvin casually tells him that it's just a habit of his. Provoked, Victor attempts to attack Kelvin by concealing himself in the smoke using his burrowing skill. However, Gerard easily senses Victor's presence and decides to confront him directly. Soon, Kelvin quickly takes charge and commands Clotho to drain mana from Victor, while simultaneously summoning his glory sanctuary to immobilize one of Victor's arms. But despite these attacks, Victor is not defeated yet, and he attempts to summon an attack on Kelvin from behind as a last resort, but to Victor's surprise, Ifo manages to evade his presence detection skill completely, allowing her to strike him with a blazing arrow from behind while Gerard charges at Victor and successfully severs his left arm, resulting in the effect of Glory's sanctuary being drained off. So Kelvin immediately urges Gerard to move out of the way. With their combined attack, Victor gets even more pissed and transforms into his most advanced and ferocious form, and even after taking multiple hits from Kelvin, Gerard, and Eiffel, Victor remains absolutely unmoved, and while responding swiftly, Kelvin orders Gerard to take up a defensive stance. Meanwhile, Victor charges at Gerard with the intent to kill, tearing through every barrier in his path. Melfina, on the other hand, clarifies to Gerard that if he is to fall, then everyone present in the dungeon will die, and with the combined strength of Kelvin, Eiffel, Gerard, and Clotho, it finally manages to defeat Victor. However, as the battle concludes, a massive wall collapses towards Sarah, and Victor immediately rushes to her aid while successfully throwing the wall away. But unfortunately, his heroic act leaves him even more severely injured. Seeing this, Kevin comes to the realization that Victor never meant to eat Sarah or absorb her powers, but rather Victor was protecting Sarah from the get-go. Victor then explains to Kelvin and the others that Gustav had placed a protective seal on Sarah, and only a mortal can unlock it, and with his last breath, Victor makes a heartfelt request to Kelvin, asking him to take Sarah in as his companion and keep her safe. Despite Kelvin's offer for Victor to become his companion, Victor humbly declines as his loyalty lies solely with his lord, Gustav, and with that, Victor passes away. Kelvin, honoring Victor's last request, decides to fulfill it by breaking the seal placed on Sarah. Shortly after, Sarah awakens from unconsciousness. Kelvin then emerges from the dungeon with Sarah on his back and displays the proof of his quest completion to Old, a piece of armored skin from Victor. Old notices the girl on Kelvin's back and asks him about her identity, so to keep Sarah's demon form hidden, Kelvin uses the clip of camouflage skill, concealing her true appearance. Kelvin informs Old that he discovered Sarah in the dungeon, where she appeared to be under the influence of the demon, and explains that he intends to take her home with him. Additionally, Gerard reaches level 80. Moreover, Kelvin decides to take Sarah with him to the city, even though she has never been in a city before, since she always had lived in the mansion. Upon reaching the city, Sarah is captivated by the astonishing sights, including fruit stalls and weapon stores, among other things. Kelvin then requests Eiffel to accompany Sarah to the inn, while informing her that he will head to the guild to file a report. Turns out, upon the completion of this quest, Kelvin has been promoted to rank A, and soon as he reaches the guild, everyone surprises Kelvin with a warm welcome. During this, Kelvin also finds out that Claire and Old happens to be a married couple. Sarah, on the other hand, recollects her memory when Victor promised her to teach her how to swim, and so Sarah decides to make the full use of life that Gustav and Victor gave her. With Kelvin's smithing and Eiffel's tailoring skills reaching rank S, Kelvin decides to host an equipment unveiling party. He asks Sarah to start the unveiling, which she does gracefully. Soon after, Gerard reveals his newly crafted equipment, and Kelvin and Eiffel, on the other hand, choose to showcase their equipment in the battle. Kelvin, accompanied by his companions, and with the approval of the guild master Rio, goes on a journey to Tourage, the water nation located by the ocean. This journey is part of the promise he made to Victor, and he is determined to fulfill it. Furthermore, during their journey, Gerard inquires to Kelvin about Melfina's whereabouts, to which Kelvin explains that one day, when he woke up hungover, Melfina informed him that her divine class was the reason he couldn't summon her at will, and in response, she left temporarily to make some modifications to her artificial body, enabling the body to conceal her divine nature. While on their way, Kelvin's wagon comes across a group of bandits known as Black Wind, and upon realizing that the bandits are only level 25 to 30, Kelvin requests Sarah to take care of them. Without hesitation, Sarah steps out of the wagon, and as one of the bandit charges at her, she effortlessly knocks him out with a single punch. The rest of the bandits rush towards her, but Sarah swiftly defeats them with ease, effortlessly knocking them out in an instant. After a long journey, Kelvin, along with his companions, finally reaches Tourage. At the Adventurers Guild in Tourage, Mist, the guild master, expresses her gratitude to Kelvin for capturing the members of the Black Wind. Additionally, she reveals that Rio had informed her about Kelvin's impressive rank, a status as an adventurer. Following the conversation, Kelvin inquires if Miss and Rio are acquainted, to which Miss confirms that they have been together for the past 20 years. However, Miss further mentions to Kelvin that after wiping out the Black Wind, Christopher, the champion of Trison, and his men turned into kidnappers and human traffickers, and after being wary of the fact that Christopher is level 70, Kelvin decides that someone over 20 levels than Christopher should be good enough for this mission. Shortly, Kelvin maintains a telepathic connection with Sarah and asks her to use her presence deflection skill to sense 4 heroes over at the gate, and soon Sarah finds out that there are some people there, each at about level 50, and so Kelvin proposes to Mist that the heroes should handle the threat instead. Eventually, Mist summons the heroes and briefs them about the mission, and in due course, Kelvin and the others arrive at the dungeon where they confront and defeat the guards while successfully rescuing Ruka and her mother from captivity. As Kelvin and his companions enter the room where Christopher is, Christopher quickly recognizes Kelvin as the one who had killed Karna, the bandit leader. Upon recognizing Kelvin as a worthy opponent, Christopher acknowledges that this encounter would be an exciting fight. However, to Christopher's surprise, Kelvin calmly informs him that this will not be a fight at all. At the other end of the dungeon, the heroes approach cautiously, noticing the absence of any living presence so far. Tuya, feeling uneasy about the situation, asks Setsuna if her presence detection skill senses anything suspicious in the vicinity, and Setsuna, upon using her skill, finds out that there is a group of people present in the dungeon. Shortly after, the heroes reach the location where the victims are held captive. Unexpectedly, Clotho appears before them. Tuya, feeling threatened, instinctively points his sword at Clotho, but Ruka steps in and urges Tuya to back off while intervening to prevent any harmed conflict upon Clotho. However, Ruka's mom approaches forward and explains to Tuya that Ruka is just trying to defend an adventurer's companion, and furthermore mentions that this adventurer saved her earlier from goons. Moreover, Ruka's mom requests Tuya to help the adventurers, and so Tuya goes over to the room only to find out that Christopher along with his companions are already defeated, and as they move to the innermost part of the room, they come across Kelvin along with his companions. Kelvin mentions to the heroes that Columbus and his companions were really easy for him to kill, and soon the heroes step forward to introduce themselves. Tuya, Setsuna, Nana, and Miyabi. Kelvin unexpectedly suggests a 4-of-1 battle and mentions that in this confrontation, the victor will gain control over the others, compelling them to obey their commands. However, Kelvin actually plans to have the heroes act as witnesses in this even with the winner's right, so that Christopher and his party would lose the protection of Trison and be brought to justice. Moreover, Eiffel expresses her concern about Kelvin facing all 4 heroes alone, fearing for his safety. Nevertheless, Kelvin sees this as an opportunity to challenge himself and improve his ability to handle multiple opponents simultaneously, which he recognizes as his biggest weakness. To aid him in this endeavor, Kelvin reveals his new equipment, the Skill Ear. In the midst of the heated battle, Kelvin becomes aware of Miyabi's unique power, the Blessing of Spirits. Recognizing the significance of her ability, he swiftly moves to her position and, utilizing the Skill Eater's assistance, successfully acquires Miyabi's skill known as Parallel Processing. Upon witnessing Kelvin absorbing Miyabi's skill, Tuya's immediate reaction is to charge at him, confronting him for draining Miyabi's powers. Meanwhile, Nana rushes to heal Miyabi, and Setsuna takes on the role of protecting both of them during the intense back-and-forth battle. Despite their efforts, Kelvin proves to be formidable, managing to inflict a wound on Tuya, making him bleed. The fight carries on with high stakes for both sides. Despite the wound and the difficult situation, Tuya gathers his courage and determination to get back into the fight with Kelvin. However, as he readies himself for another confrontation, Setsuna steps forward and delivers a powerful slap to Tuya, aiming to bring him back to his senses. Then, in a heartfelt conversation, Setsuna expresses her admiration for Tuya's strength, bravery, and courage. She acknowledges his capabilities but also reminds him that he cannot bear the burden alone. Setsuna emphasizes the importance of trusting their teammates more, as it is through their combined efforts that they can have a chance to overcome the challenges and ultimately defeat the Demon Lord. In a powerful display of unity, the heroes come together and launch a harmonious attack against Kelvin. In response, Kelvin counters with his Cleft Detonation skill. During the intense battle, Kelvin points at each hero individually, urging them to use their abilities more efficiently in order to gain an advantage in the fight, and so the heroes act in perfect synchronization, launching a combined assault. Tuya and the 3 other heroes attack Kelvin simultaneously, resulting in him becoming completely frozen and immobilized. In response, Kelvin summons the Adamantite Guardian to act as a temporary defense, giving him 30 seconds to prepare a new spell. Normally, creating a new spell would take a considerable amount of time, but with the newly acquired Parallel Processing skill, Kelvin's spell casting time significantly decreases over this duration. Utilizing Radiant's Crossfire, Kelvin skillfully bypasses all the traps set by the heroes simultaneously and proceeds to neutralize each hero individually, one by one. As the battle comes to an end, Tuya and the rest of the heroes find themselves in an unfamiliar location. To their astonishment, Kelvin is already present, sitting with Ruka on his lap. Tuya is quick to react, warning Kelvin to keep his hands off of Ruka, but after having another look, he notices that Ruka is sitting willingly with a slime Clotho on her lap. Tuya recognizes that Clotho is the very slime that Ruka had tried to save earlier. Kelvin then discloses to Tuya that Clotho is actually his pet. In a sudden moment of realization, Tuya comprehends that Kelvin is the very adventurer who rescued Ruka and her mother from captivity. Overwhelmed with disbelief, Tuya drops to his knees. Additionally, Tuya grasps that the intense battle was, in fact, a test designed for them. Tuya then hurriedly approaches Kelvin, offering his sincere apologies, and in response, Kelvin assures Tuya that he holds no grudges towards him as long as Tuya fulfills the promise they made. Tuya, now fully committed, expresses his willingness to do whatever it takes to honor that promise. Ruka, her mother, and the other abductees are safely returned to their homes. Shortly after, Mist inquires to Kelvin about his plans for the future, and Kelvin, with a mischievous smile, mentions of a fun and amusing penalty game that lies ahead. Meanwhile, Kelvin takes on the role of training the newly recruited heroes. Despite their success in defeating the Octogenarian, they encounter some mistakes and errors along the way during their training sessions. During their lunch break, an urgent situation arises as Sarah runs towards the group being chased by a formidable monster. Kelvin swiftly turns to Tuya and proposes a challenge, whether he wants to take on the powerful Rank S monster that is causing the disturbance. Recognizing that he is not yet prepared to face the formidable Rank S master, Tuya humbly explains to Kelvin and the other heroes that he needs some time to train and formulate a proper plan before taking on the monster. After a few days of contemplation, the heroes come to a collective decision not to burden Kelvin and the others any longer, so they decide to leave and pursue their own paths. During this time, Kelvin approaches Tuya and presents him with a special pendant that he crafted himself. Tuya graciously accepts the pendant and expresses his sincere appreciation to Kelvin for the invaluable help he has provided. With their gratitude expressed, Tuya and his companions prepare to set sail on their next adventure. Contemplatively, Kelvin proposes the idea of waging war against the rising empire to Gerard. In response, Gerard reflects on how, at the beginning, he didn't expect their party to progress far. However, as time passed, their group has grown stronger and more capable, and now Gerard believes they have the potential to take on even more powerful foes, including monsters of rank. As Eiffel expresses her gratitude towards Kelvin, acknowledging his kind and generous heart for providing each hero with a pendant that grants minor stat buffs and hidden effects. However, their conversation is interrupted as a visitor arrives. Kelvin informs the others that they are being summoned by the ruler of the country. Kelvin and his companions arrive at the castle and are welcomed inside, where they are greeted by the Queen of Toraj, Tsubaki Fujiwara. Upon hearing her name, Kelvin realizes that she bears a Japanese name. Queen Tsubaki expresses her deep gratitude to Kelvin and his group for their heroic efforts in defeating the Black Wind and the evil dragon within the dungeon. In response to Tsubaki's offer to grant any reward of his desire, Kelvin requests a purchasing permit to acquire the crops. However, the queen surprises him by saying that he can have as much rice delivered to him as he wishes, free of cost. After a few days, Kelvin and Tsubaki enjoy a meal prepared by Eiffel, who surprises them with her cooking skills. Having reached rank S, during the meal, Tsubaki warmly invites Kelvin and his companions to stay longer. However, Kelvin politely informs her that it's time for their group to return to Parth. Not long after their conversation, Tsubaki accompanies Kelvin to the teleportation gate. With its magical powers, they will be able to reach Parth in no time. Upon their arrival in Parth, Claire brings up a rumor she heard about the Queen of Toraj being fond of Kelvin. Curious to know the source, Kelvin discovers that Angie has been spreading this news to everyone she encounters, boasting about Kelvin's connection with the Queen. Kelvin informs Eiffel and Claire of his plan to go out soon to purchase a house. Later, as Kelvin takes his companions to their new home, they all appear filled with excitement and joy. Kelvin then decides to hire Ruka and her mother as servants for his new house. Ruka's mother, Ailey, introduces herself to the others, warmly joining the household staff and becoming part of their new home. After taking in a refreshing bath, Kelvin finally settles down in his comfortable bed, contemplating the remarkable distance he has covered in such a brief span. After Melfina adjusts her artificial body, Kelvin prepares to summon her, and he succeeds. Melfina then appears in front of him in her human form. As dinner unfolds, Kelvin and his companions enjoy a harmonious gathering. Melfina takes the opportunity to introduce her physical form to the others, and they all warmly welcome her. After some time, Melfina, as an appreciation for summoning her, gives Kelvin her blessing, which has two effects. The first effect allows Kelvin to be completely immune to an otherwise fatal strike once per month, and as for the second effect is the ability to summon heroes. While Kelvin wonders about the heroes' progress on the western continent, Sarah and Melfina train rigorously, honing their skills and fighting on equal terms. By the end of their training, they develop a mutual appreciation and respect for each other. After the battle, Kelvin tends to Sarah and Melfina's injuries. During this time, Melfina notices that Kelvin seems a bit absent-minded lately. Eiffel comforts Melfina by explaining that Kelvin was summoned from another world, and his preoccupation might be related to matters beyond their understanding. Furthermore, Melfina approaches Kelvin to check on his well-being. Upon her arrival, Kelvin inquires to Melfina about the reason for reincarnating the heroes, and in response, Melfina tells Kelvin that she needs to first explain about the Demon Lord before delving into the details of the hero's reincarnation. Furthermore, Melfina mentions to Kelvin that throughout the history, the demon lords have a special ability called Marapizuna, and that it has two effects. Firstly, it could draw out and amplify the owner's heart, and secondly, it nullifies all damage done to the owner, and therefore, the heroes from Otherworld are required, because the foreign power that they possess can easily nullify any demon lord's invincibility. Moreover, Melfina suggests Kelvin to use reincarnation summoning, which means to summon a soul of someone, and shortly after consulting with everyone, Kelvin decides to fulfill Gerard's promise. At the same time, Eiffel clarifies to Ruka and Eiley that Kelvin is about to undertake an extraordinary type of summoning, and she urges them to act appropriately during the process. Kelvin then addresses the group, expressing that they will allow the summoned individual to make their own choices and decisions in life. As Kelvin commences the summoning ritual, he first unsummons Gerard, Melfina, and the others. Shortly after, Eiffel hands Kelvin a mana potion, which fully replenishes his MP, mana points. Kelvin decides to utilize all of his remaining mana points, leaving just one to summon a hero. As the summoning process begins, there's a moment of anticipation before a bolt of lightning strikes the house. When the process concludes, a young female child appears before them, successfully summoned as the hero. The girl introduces herself to Kelvin as Ryoseki. Kelvin then reveals that he was the one who summoned her to this world. Upon hearing this, Ryo is overcome with emotions and instantly bursts into tears, expressing her heartfelt gratitude to Kelvin for bringing her here. While sleeping, Ryo has a dream where a floating menu appears, informing her that she has been reincarnated into a new world. Excited to explore this new reality, Ryo rushes out to experience the wonders of her new existence. However, her joy is interrupted when Kelvin appears and shares his own story of how he too was reincarnated into this world. Kelvin inquires if Ryo has any memories of her past life, unlike him. Ryo explains that she has been seriously ill for as long as she can remember. She goes on to mention that when she died, she found herself questioning the purpose of life. However, her mood brightens up as she expresses her gratitude to Kelvin for rescuing her from the deep pit of despair she was in. Furthermore, Ryo asks Kelvin if he can take her in his party. However, Kelvin asks her if she is adamant about it, to which she assures Kelvin as he agrees. After some time, Kelvin mentions to Ryo that he wants her to be his half-sister, and with a joyful and honorary demeanor, Ryo shows her consent without any hesitations. Furthermore, Kelvin suggests to Ryo that she should change her name as it resembles that of an old man whom he perceives as cunning. After some discussion, it is agreed that Ryo will now be called Ryan from this point forward. As Kelvin wakes up, he finds Sarah, Melfina, and Ryan sleeping along with him on his bed. In Sagria Forest, Kelvin decides to utilize his experience-sharing skill, enabling experience points earned from defeating enemies to be shared among all party members. This motivates Sarah, Gerard, and Clotho to compete with each other, striving to kill the highest number of monsters. Their goal is to ensure that Ruka and Eiley can fight alongside Kelvin and his party when danger arises by strengthening their abilities through the shared experience points. While Melfina alerts Kelvin about the impending arrival of a shadow monster, he takes the opportunity to ask Ryan if she likes dogs, and as the shadow wolf emerges, Kelvin effortlessly defeats it using his air pressure technique. Impressed by the creature's strength, Kelvin decides to instantly summon the shadow wolf as his pet. Not long after, Old arrives and informs Kelvin that his party has become eligible for a rank B promotion, and so they have come to Sangria Forest to hunt as many monsters as possible. Old is already acquainted with Sarah and Eiffel, but Kelvin takes the opportunity to introduce his two new party members, Melfina and Ryan, to Old and his companions. Soon, Gerard, Clotho, and Sarah arrives and expresses their wonder to Kelvin about Old and his party members' arrival, to which Kelvin mentions to them that Old and Co. were here to earn their promotion by hunting monsters. Suddenly, a guilty emotion occupies their faces, and after looking through her far-sight skill, Eiffel lets Kelvin know that there are no monsters left in the forest. Kelvin rushes to Old and offers his apologies, but Old shows no signs of holding any grudges and assures Kelvin that everything is okay. Moreover, Old reveals to Kelvin that he will soon be taking a promotion exam to achieve rank S. This will be Kelvin's first formal examination for promotion. Soon after, Ryan tells Kelvin that she has given the dog the name Alex. In response, Kelvin declares that Alex will now be a permanent member of their family. As days pass, the bond between Alex and Ryan strengthens further, and with consistent training and companionship, their connection grows even stronger. While in the mansion, Kelvin and the rest of the group sense a constant presence of mysterious figures lurking around them. Using the far sight skill borrowed from Eiffel, Kelvin discovers that these intruders are not high level. Seeing an opportunity for Ryan to practice and improve her skills, Kelvin asks her to handle the intruders, which would also allow her to gain valuable experience in combat. Furthermore, Kelvin entrusts Ryan with his enhanced mithril sword, a weapon he borrowed from Cashel and personally reforged. He does this in preparation for the confrontation with the intruders, who are seeking revenge for the humiliation inflicted upon Christopher by Kelvin. After some time, Ryan emerges from the mansion, accompanied by Alex, to confront the intruders. With remarkable skill and ease, Ryan and Alex dispatch the intruders one by one, leaving them with no chance of victory. The intruders are defeated effortlessly by Ryan and her trusty companion, Alex. Shortly after, Kelvin decides to deal with the hidden intruder and asks Clotho to clean up the mess in front of the mansion. Over at the city of Trison, Zel Trison, the Emperor of Trison, is worried that if they are to take even one more wrong step, then they would be dragged into a war against all three of their neighborhoods all at once, and so Trison proposes the idea of going for an all-out war against the three nations, and although Princess Shutola also agrees with Tristan's point of view, but she thinks that now is not the time since the other nations are not as fragile as they seem. Asgrad then speaks in favor of Tristan and votes for waging the war. However, Dan D. Alba denies the idea of waging war as well. After the votes being tied, General Clive gets summoned and his vote would be the deciding factor for the future of Trison. Kelvin, along with his companions, arrives at the City of Elves and is heading towards the Village of Elves solely because of his promotion exam that he has been provided by Rio, the Guild Master. Actually, the quest comes from the Beast King, Leonhart Gon himself, and moreover, Leonhart Gon will be present there as well. As they embark on their journey, Kelvin mentions to the other members that he is sure about Trison's involvement in this, so he encourages his party members to go all out on this quest. Out of nowhere, a group of elves come across their wagon. Kelvin quickly steps out to inform them that they have been personally invited by Leonhart Gon. At that moment, Nellis, the leader of the elves, arrives and apologizes to Kelvin for the behavior of his group. Moreover, Nellis recognizes Ephil and addresses her by the name Rumel. After some time, Nellis leads Kelvin and the rest to his place. During their visit, Kelvin inquires to Nellis about the reason behind him referring to Ephil as Rumel. Nellis begins to recount events from about 20 years ago on the Western Forest continent. He describes how their village used to thrive in peace until the fateful day they were attacked by the Flame Dragon King. To this day, they remain clueless as to why the Flame Dragon turned their village to ashes, leaving them in despair and uncertainty. Nellis goes on to share that he lost his legs during the intense confrontation with the Flame Dragon. He praises Rumel for her bravery as she fearlessly confronted the dragon with unwavering determination. However, their joy was short-lived as they later discovered Rumel's lifeless body in the forest. Fearing the possible return of the Dragon King, the elves decided to leave the western continent and seek safety in their current land. As Nellis' story unfolds, everyone begins to wonder if Rumel was Ephil's mother. However, Kelvin suggests that they should focus on their current quest. He informs Nellis that, according to Leonhart's information, there is a new type of monster that leaves its underlings to abduct elves. Shortly after, Nellis informs Kelvin that the monsters have attacked their village 3 times, but he suspects their intentions are more focused on kidnapping elves rather than outright attacking. Hearing this, everyone in the room expresses their unwavering support in defending the village of the elves and vows to give their very best to protect them. However, Kelvin has something to consult with Nellis, and that is to make some changes in the village. As time passes, the intruders led by Trison make their way towards the village, accompanied by their tamed monsters. However, Ephil skillfully eliminates the intruders one by one using the hidden bow Merciless crafted by Kelvin. In addition to Ephil's prowess, Kelvin has strategically set up various traps, effectively cutting off every possible route for the monsters to enter the village. Meanwhile, on the other side, one of Trison's intruders hurries to inform their commander that the Cardinal has been defeated. As Sarah and Ryan approach the commander, he quickly sounds the horn, signaling the awakening of the Giant Lord, a powerful and formidable adversary. And in that critical moment, Melfina encourages Ryan to face the rank S monster, Giant Lord, on her own. Gathering her courage, Ryan charges at the giant with her sword, but it shatters upon impact. Determined to prove her strength, Rayon fearlessly continues her assault, this time utilizing the Thundering Edge technique. With great skill and determination, Rian manages to bring down the Giant Lord, but to her surprise, the giant transforms into its true form. However, this doesn't deter Ryan in the slightest. Undeterred, she charges at the giant once more and with the aid of Thundering Edge, finally succeeds in defeating the Giant Lord. Ryan, after defeating the giant, instantly goes to Melfina to share her victory. However, Ryan ponders if Master would also be proud at her for getting so strong in a short period of time. Meanwhile, Ephil and Kelvin gets attacked by General Clive, who thought she had already killed them off. As Kelvin and Ephil confront General Clive, Kelvin instructs Ephil to step back as he is about to dismantle the tower. True to his word, Kelvin proceeds with the task of dismantling the tower. Kelvin then attacks General Clive with 4 swords he gained from dismantling the tower. However, General Clive, with the help of Helix Barrier, defends through all of Kelvin's attacks, since no magical or physical attack can get past the barrier. Meanwhile, Ephil, with the help of her penetrating arrow, destroys the Helix Barrier. In the ensuing confrontation, Kelvin summons his golems to aid him. On the other hand, Clive calls forth his companions and instructs them to engage with the golems. However, Kelvin commands his golems to refrain from killing the companions. Instead, he instructs them to dismantle the companions, aiming to break the Charm Eyes curse and liberate them from captivity. As the battlefield clears, only Kelvin and Clive remain, their eyes filled with anger and determination. They charge at each other with fierce intensity, but to their surprise, neither is able to land a decisive blow. The fight becomes a relentless game of chasing and evading, as both Kelvin and Clive display incredible skill and resilience, making it seemingly impossible to harm one another. As Clive attempts to flee, Kelvin relentlessly pursues him, managing to keep up. During a brief pause in the chase, Clive provokingly taunts Kelvin, calling him a battle junkie who revels in fights. In reply, Kelvin proudly acknowledges that his heart does indeed throb with excitement due to the immense power he has harnessed and the accomplishments he has achieved through battles. Moments later, Kelvin clashes with Clive, wielding his Vortex Edge, while Clive counters with his Helix Barrier. The collision of their powerful attacks proves too much for Kelvin's magic wand, causing it to shatter under the immense pressure. On the other hand, the impact leaves a deep cut on Clive's face, further fueling his anger and rage. With all these emotions, Clive performs his rank S spell, Tempest Barrier, which is nothing less than a calamity, and in return, Kelvin takes out the Black Staff of Disaster, a rank S equipment from Clotho's inventory, and immediately asks Clotho to go and hide. Kelvin gathers all his strength, and with a swing of his staff, he finally succeeds in breaking the Tempest Barrier, resulting in Clive's legs being cut off. As Kelvin moves in to deliver the final blow to Clive, Tristan appears on the scene and with a laser, teleporting Clive away from the battlefield. Despite his defeat, Tristan acknowledges the outcome and chooses to retreat. He warns Kelvin that they will cross paths again in the future, leaving an air of uncertainty and anticipation between them. As everyone regroups after the intense battle, Nellis suggests a grand feast to celebrate their victory. Meanwhile, at Trison, Tristan keeps Clive imprisoned in a locked room, restraining him with chains on a slab. Tristan arrives and coldly informs Clive that he will now be used as an experiment. Later, Eiffel discovers Kelvin sitting alone under a tree, lost in thought. Concerned, Eiffel asks if something is bothering him. Kelvin opens up and shares that he feels fortunate for everything he has achieved and gained so far in his journey. Kelvin further mentions that he will do everything within his powers to protect this family that he has created and he won't regret anything anymore. Eiffel requests Kelvin's assistance in putting on her mother's keepsake, a precious item she received from Nellis. As they share this heartfelt moment, Kelvin's other companions approach them, walking towards them with smiles on their faces. Moreover, Leonhard gone and a little girl's presence comes forth and thanks Kelvin for saving their village. While appreciating, Leonhard announces that Kelvin has passed his exam and has been promoted to rank S when suddenly everyone showers their good wishes at Kelvin. Furthermore, Leonhard mentions that in 4 days, an adventurer promotion ceremony will be held where Kelvin will fight other rank S adventurers in the mock battles. However, everyone sees it coming as Kelvin immediately bursts into laughter upon hearing that he will be facing stronger opponents, because at last, he is still a battle junkie.